The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. Today we're discussing the new 13th Doctor story, War of the Sontarans. I'm Father Cory Sticha, and joining me today on the panel is Jimmy Akin. How's it going, Jimmy?
Howdy, Father Cory.
Remember to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook at facebook.com/Secrets of Doctor Who. Retweet us at Twitter at SQPN. And of course, leave us comments to let us know what you think and what your feedback is. Now, let's get into this week's episode. Would you give us a feedback or recap there, Jimmy?
Sure. So, spoilers ahoy. Here we go. Last time on Doctor Who, the Doctor, Dan, Yaz, and the Tardis were sucked into the universe-ending Flux. It turns out that since the Sontarans knew the Flux was coming, they snuck onto Earth just before the Lupari created a shield around it. Beginning with a base in Liverpool, they started spreading out over Earth and planning a temporal offensive against periods in Earth's history so they could take it over and make it a Sontaran base throughout all of its history. The pilot project for that incursion is in 1855 in the Crimean War, and that's where the Doctor, Yaz, Dan, and the Tardis have landed after they came into contact with the Flux at the end of last episode. Dan and Yaz are mysteriously transported away from the Doctor, which she attributes to the mix of temporal vortex energy plus the Flux. Stuck in 1855, because the TARDIS now has no doors, the Doctor seeks to get the Sontarans out of the Crimean War. The commander of the British forces there, Lieutenant General Logan, resists her efforts, but seems to come around after his men suffer a devastating loss in battle. General Logan and medical worker Mary Seagull then help the Doctor to force a Sontaran retreat by draining their ships of needed supplies while the Sontarans are in their rest cycle. Although the Sontarans are retreating, General Logan blows them up anyway in revenge for all the men he's lost. Meanwhile, Dan has been transported back to 21st century Liverpool, where he meets his parents, learns about the Sontaran base, and infiltrates it. He and Carvanista use one Sontaran ship to destroy the others, thus destroying their invasion force. Also, meanwhile, Yaz and Vendor have been transported to the Temple of Atropos on the planet Time, which is instrumental to the proper flow of time in the universe. This function is controlled by a small group of people known as the Mori, two of whom have died. Swarm, his sister Azure, and a Thanos clone named Passenger show up, and they clearly have a backstory with the planet Time. Swarm remotely hijacks the ailing TARDIS to bring the Doctor and Dan to himself, and he reveals that he's forced Yaz and Vendor to replace two of the Mori as a temporary fix. He tells the Doctor that when he snaps his fingers, all the power of time will flow through them, killing them instantly or at least in a matter of seconds. He then snaps his fingers, giving us our second cliffhanger, the end.
Yeah, so a lot going on again in this episode. It's some of the threads that we pointed out last episode are starting to come together. Of course, we got the Sontarans are kind of the big one, but we've got three different time locations. We got the Crimean, we've got Liverpool, and then we've got the Temple of Atropos, which we've just learned about for the first time. And we have TARDIS and companion separation like within 5 minutes of the beginning of the episode. It's pretty impressive we lose both. I like the way the TARDIS keeps the Doctor out. Instead of locking the door, just gets rid of the door altogether.
Yeah, last time we had too many doors on the inside. Now we have no doors on the outside.
So it kind of makes it hard to get in if their door doesn't exist anymore. Then I had got a chuckle of the companions fading away because all I could think of was Back to the Future, where his future is being changed and he was starting to fade away. He's losing his hand and fading away. But
at least he didn't have a picture. At least the Doctor didn't have a picture of her companions with them fading away from the head down.
Exactly. So probably the best thing to do is just let's pick one of the locations and start, and we'll kind of go through all three. So of course, best one to start one is 1855 Crimea. And of course it's kind of interesting. Okay, this is kind of a historical, but it's a historical that the Sontarans are there instead of Russia and China. Neither of those countries exist anymore, apparently.
Yeah, people may not be familiar with where Crimea is. It's an area around the Black Sea, so that's why the Doctor keeps mentioning Russia.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's something that's been in recent history because Russia has been reasserting control over it versus Ukraine. During the Soviet Union time, it was actually considered part of the Ukraine. But now after the Soviet Union broke up, Russia is saying that it's part of it again. So it's actually something that's been in recent history for some conflict.
Yeah,
as well.
I thought that in the in this sequence the graphics were really good. We have a big CGI battle between Sontarans and British troops, and that was pretty well rendered. I liked that. I liked also the way the Sontarans are being played again for drama instead of comedy. And they were, I thought, effective as villains, with the exception of one sequence where they turn in 21st century Liverpool, where they turn into stormtroopers and can't hit Dan with their weapons for anything. But in general, I thought they were well played as villains. There was some nice comedy mixed in with that as well. And it was great to see Dan Starkey again.
Yes.
Dan Starkey has played a bunch of Sontarans in New Who, and this time he's playing a soldier named Zvild, but you're probably more familiar with him for playing the comedic character Strax.
Right. I was actually kind of half hoping that they were going to say that his name was Strax, this was Strax in an alternate universe or something like that. But
or one of his clone brothers, because they're all clones.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually kind of interesting, is we're starting to see two different strains of the Sontaran clones. They're played by different actors, different voices. And so the commander, Skak, is one strain, and then Zvild is another one that's more like Strax. So it's kind of interesting that we're seeing that there's different strains. Usually you just see one strain that's repeated over and over, but starting to see that a little bit different.
One thing I thought you might find interesting, Father, is they name check Lynx.
Yes,
who was the very first Sontaran we ever met back in the John Pertwee Third Doctor serial, The Time Warrior.
Yes. Yeah. He claimed the Commander Skak claimed that Lynx had claimed Earth as Sontar property, and so he was just recovering that, and that's why he was there. They were there on Earth to do that. So that was kind of nice call back way back to the 70s.
Something I was confused by with regard to Lynx was Lynx died or appeared to die in the Time Warrior. Mm-hmm. He was shot by an arrow and then his ship blew up. But nevertheless, at the end of this one, when Carvanista and Dan are blowing up the ships in 21st century Liverpool,
right,
you hear a voiceover. Now we see like Sontarans running around with their helmets on, and one of them runs up to the camera and with the helmet on, but then you hear a voice say, "This is Commander Lynx to all. The fleet is under attack." And so that could imply that Lynx survived his Time Warrior, and that may be him running up to the camera.
Yeah, I missed that voiceover. I heard the part about the fleet's under attack, but I missed that it was Lynx. So it could be, or this could be again. We're talking about alternate times, and time is kind of in flux, not pun intended.
And you can blame any inconsistencies on the Time War.
Well, now we've got the Time War and flux, so now we got two things that you can blame any inconsistencies. Going back to Crimea, Mrs. Seagull is a very interesting character. She's actually a historical figure. Based on a historical figure who was a contemporary of Florence Nightingale, who's a name that a lot of people might remember as someone kind of one of the first field nurses, and women as field nurses.
And Florence Nightingale also was involved in the Crimean War, but we don't see her. We just get a name check.
Correct. Yeah, she is name checked. But Miss Seagull, she was actually a Jamaican who wanted to help out as a nurse. She wanted to help out to care for the soldiers, and built a British hotel. She built like this ramshackle facility to care for soldiers, to provide food and drink and so on, to provide comfort to soldiers, and but was rejected by the British Army. They actually did not want her there, but she just paid for her own way. She had some help from other people, got some of the locals to help build her British hotel that we got to see, and was very, very influential in actually helping out, caring for not just British soldiers. Of course, Crimean War wasn't just Brits. I know French were involved, or other countries that were involved in the Crimean War as well. But she was very influential in caring for soldiers behind the lines.
Yeah, and I haven't been able to determine. I don't think she was classically trained in medicine, but she, from what I gather, she practiced kind of folk medicine. So she would like use herbal remedies,
correct,
to try to help the soldiers.
That's what I'd read as well. Yeah. So, but it was interesting, to bring this historic figure in.
Mm-hmm. I really liked her. She was great. Mm-hmm. Who I didn't like was Lieutenant General Logan. Because whereas Mary Seagull is a competent character who is an agent and doing things and doing good, Lieutenant General Logan is a stereotype. And he's the pig-headed military guy who is just deluded with dreams of queen and empire and glory, and he's going to face the Sontarans no matter what. And then he gets his butt kicked. And he seems to come around, and then he turns into a villain again, where he blows up the Sontarans, even though they're retreating. And even during the period where he seems to be redeemed, he is played as an inferior person. He doesn't really become competent. When the doctor is laying out her plan for here's how we're going to get the Sontarans to leave, she's like complimenting Mary Seagull and going, "Ooh, gold star and check mark for you. Take a note, General Logan." And she's like poking him with a sharp stick. And so they're constantly running down Logan. Even when he's not being an outright full-blown stereotype, he shifts from being the inflexible warrior idiot to being a sort of chastened warrior idiot to being an outright villain again. And I don't like the way they handled his character. I would have liked to see a more sympathetic portrayal of Logan, the way we got a sympathetic portrayal of Mary Seagull.
Oh, I agree completely. I mean, it was, and the first thing I wrote down is, oh yeah, he's a typical drunk, arrogant general. He thinks he knows everything. He thinks he's the one in charge and all that. But yeah, especially that scene where she's lecturing him. I really didn't like that. It just, he could do nothing. She kept berating him, and that's not necessary. That really isn't necessary.
Yeah, and you're right. The doctor is lecturing them, not just in the typical sense in which the doctor lectures people. She is literally conducting a lecture with a blackboard and a pointer, and it is a literal lecture.
Exactly. And that was, and I mean, part of that was kind of cute, but part of it was just kind of like, why did, even when he tried to respond, she's like, no, you're wrong, next, move on. So that was, however, he did kind of, in a way, bring it on himself, sort of, only because, the doctor does the parley with Commander Skak, and she starts on this planet is protected and you will not win as long as I am here. And I speak for all Earth. And of course, he immediately, the general immediately pulls a gun and you don't speak for us. And now we're going to fight.
And that was fine, but this guy rose to be a general because he had some ability, and he doesn't get to show any of that ability. He only gets to show ability at the very end,
right,
when he's being a villain again. He doesn't get to show any ability when he's working for good,
right. And I've got a little complaint about the end, but we'll get to that when we get to the end. So one thing I like is the doctor tricks the Svild to reveal where their base is. And of course she follows, and there's a holographic shield that Mary Seagull, she's like, he just disappeared. It's like, no, not really. It's a shield. It's just a hologram. But Mary Seagull's sitting there, she's writing down the movements of the Sontarans. The doctor leaves her there to track them, because that's one of her skills, is kind of watching how people move, and they're observing the conditions of the army.
She's a spy.
Yeah. And she did, very good job. Notice that the Sontarans have to refill their suits every 27 hours. Takes them 7.5 minutes to refill their suits every 27 hours.
And stupidly, they've all they've synchronized their suit refills. So that makes them all vulnerable for that period.
Which, of course, the doctor takes advantage of, gets the general, and surprisingly, he agrees to help out with some of his troops to basically, I'd written down poison, but actually basically drain their resupply lines. They get these chemicals and nutrients through this gas. She drains their lines so that they can't.
And that's an interesting addition to the mythology of the Sontarans, that that's why they wear their suits on Earth. It's not simply for armor like we'd always probably assumed. It's because they're also in environment suits that are compensating for the difference between Sontar and Earth. Well, by the way, I liked when they found the hologram cliff face, which reminded me of the duck blinds you'd see in Next Generation.
Oh, sure.
But when the doctor sticks her hand through it, we get this POV shot from within the duck blind, looking out at them through a kind of hologram effect. And Mary Seagull's way of understanding this is to say, oh, it's a conjuring trick. And the doctor says, basically, yeah. And I liked that. That was a nice 19th century way of comprehending what this was.
Yeah, a technological conjuring trick. That's a good way to put it. Of course, it shows the arrogance of the Sontarans. You've got this point where someone can walk in where you can see them, but they can't see you, and they don't put a guard there.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
As the doctor points out, the Sontarans aren't really that intelligent.
Exactly. Now, with the probic vents, I thought they've always kind of explained that as a filter for Earth's atmosphere, because I know wasn't there wasn't it what storyline was that, the Atmos, where the purpose of the Atmos add-ons to the cars in the 10th Doctor's era was to turn Earth into the atmosphere that the Sontarans needed. So at least that's where New Who is concerned, that we've known that Sontar's atmosphere is different than Earth's.
Yes. Yeah. And so the probic vents are the points on the back of their necks where they have a little device that in classic Who, I don't know if its function was really explained, but it is their vulnerable point.
Right.
It's their Achilles neck.
Yeah,
and so if you hit him there, and we get some nice stuff in the 21st century where Dan is handed a frying pan, which is a wok that his mom owns, and he apparently some drunk guy in 21st century Liverpool hit them there with something, and they fell over unconscious, and so that's how humans learned that they were vulnerable there. And so now Dan is running around with Chekhov's frying pan.
Yeah.
And at some point he's going to have to use it, which he does. Yep. We also get a lot of walk jokes. I love it so we meet Dan's parents, and his dad, when Dan is about to infiltrate the Sontaran base, you have this solemn moment, and normally it would be a gun, but instead he's handing over the frying pan, and it's like, take this, son, in case you need it. And I really liked that. That was fun.
I liked Dan's parents, and this is one thing that is, we've complained before about how parents are portrayed in New Who. And here you've got Dan has obviously got a good relationship with his parents, and his parents obviously have a good relationship. Yeah, they grouch at each other, but they seem to have a good relationship all around. The family seems to have a good relationship, and that, I hate to say it, has been pretty rare in New Who. Yeah,
it is nice to see it here. A couple more things in the Crimean that we get to see when Dan Starkey's character Svild goes back to his commander to ask for to let him know that the doctor is there, and he has this informant that wants a parlay about where the doctor is, not realizing it's the doctor herself. He is told by his commander that you have performed adequately. And the reason he's saying it that way is because this guy got injured and captured, which is like the greatest shame. And so he doesn't want to compliment him. And Svild then asks for mercy, by which he means he wants to be killed right now. He wants a mercy killing, and which then happens. And so we see that. Interestingly, now, up to now in the episode, we've been hearing the Sontarans use their battle cry, Sontar Ha. a lot. And that's something that New Who introduced a number of seasons ago. But then when they're going to have the mercy killing on Sfild, the commander says Sontar Ho. And Dan Starkey then also says Sontar Ho immediately before he's killed. So apparently this is an alternative to the battle cry that means something a little different. I'm not sure what, but it was interesting.
Yeah, like a defeat acknowledgement or something, some kind of
something.
It's the negative form maybe of Sontar Ha. Yeah, that was kind of an interesting twist to it, and again, this is all part of making the Sontarans much more dramatic characters. They aren't just the potato head clowns like they've been portrayed for so much of Doctor
Now
Who.
They're the dangerous potato head clowns.
Exactly. Yeah.
We also get to see a new psychic power from the Doctor in this episode. At one point, after she's realized that General Logan is not going to cooperate with her and she's going to need to take things into her own hands, she turns to an ordinary soldier and takes out the pinky of her right hand and jams it up under his chin and puts him to sleep for 6 hours.
Yeah.
And so she apparently has this psychic pinky finger poke that she can do.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was supposed to be psychic or it was supposed to be more like Venusian karate or something like that, because John Pertwee would do something like that too, where he could paralyze someone with 2 fingers.
Yeah, I mean, you may be right. It may be a martial art. I took it as psychic. I thought there was a little audio effect.
Could be.
That was communicating it was more than just physical, but I could be mistaken on that.
Yeah, I couldn't miss that too. But still, it was kind of it's something we hadn't seen before.
Yeah. We also have another literary allusion in the Crimean sequence where Mary Seagull turns to the Doctor in a desperate moment and says, "What are we going to do? Or where are we going to go?" And the Doctor says, "Half a league onward." And that's an allusion to the famous poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, which is set in the Crimean War and is about to, the fuller line in the poem is like half a league, half a league, half a league onward. And it's about this doomed light brigade. And so for the Doctor to invoke that is very ominous.
Well, the Lieutenant General introduced himself as the commander of the Light Brigade. So there's that connection.
Also, in case you're wondering, half a league is 1.73 miles.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of those measurements we don't really use, kind of like furlongs for racing, same kind of deal.
Yeah. Also, in the Crimean sequence, the Doctor uses a Sontaran's probic vent to take him down after she and Mary Seagull have boarded a Sontaran starship. In the Crimean War, the Doctor uses a slingshot to propel something and ding a Sontaran from behind on his probic vent, taking him down. And when I saw the Doctor do that, I thought, I know I've seen this imagery before on Doctor Who. Where have I seen this? I thought that the second Doctor might have used a slingshot at some point, but I don't believe so. I think the Doctor's, either the second or the fourth, has pulled a slingshot out of his pocket at one time. But it was actually, I think, Ace taking down a Cyberman. That was what I was thinking of primarily. Also, I believe Rory, I looked it up, and not only did Ace use a slingshot on a Cyberman, but Rory used a slingshot once too.
Right.
But it was interesting to see the slingshot as well. And so the Doctor was, while Dan was using Chekhov's frying pan, the Doctor was using a slingshot to do the same thing.
Yep. Yeah, it's the slingshot's one of those things where, the Doctor has to empty his pockets and there's a yo-yo and a half-eaten apple or something like that, and the slingshot and, stuff kind of especially in the fourth Doctor, that was kind of a regular sight gag of how many things can he actually fit in his pockets as he goes along. And you're right, a yo-yo. Yeah, or not a yo-yo, but a slingshot. But yeah, I don't remember the Doctor ever actually using one. Oh, funny that she's interested in using that kind of weapon, just not a gun. Oh, well. Yeah.
I liked so there's this great sequence where we're in parallel time tracks. In the 21st century, Dan has infiltrated a Sontaran ship, and in the 19th century, the Doctor has infiltrated a Sontaran ship, and Dan has been taking a record of what he's doing with his phone. He's like filming himself as a message for the doctor. And I don't know that he knows how he's going to get this message to the doctor, but he ends up pressing buttons on the Sontaran ship in the 21st century and activates it, whatever circuits allow it to communicate with the temporal incursion into the 19th century. So we get this sequence with the doctor and Dan being able to talk to each other over a screen for a few minutes. And Dan is confused. He's talking about how the Sontarans have invaded, and he says they have this obsession with Japanese food. They keep talking about tempura command and tempura incursion.
Yeah.
And the doctor helps him figure out that's temporal command and temporal incursion. But he keeps up the food with the food jokes, because he then knocks a Sontaran out and refers to it as pan-fried Sontaran.
Yep.
And then he says, and I'm just going to walk right out of here.
Yep. Yeah. He definitely get the puns in, but it's interesting, though, for someone who is very new with traveling with the doctor, very new with dealing with things like alien incursions and stuff like that. He's pretty sharp. I mean, he's figuring things out pretty quick.
Well, actually, I have a little too quick. I have in my notes, Dan clearly seems to have experience with situations like this. He is way too functional, way too fast if he was a total noob. And I'm thinking that line from episode 1 about, I used to have a friend with one of these Tardises, may not have just been a joke. I suspect he's been in situations like this before, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, we're gonna find out more as we go along. But it's interesting to watch him. And of course, right after he does the line about the walk, I'm going to walk out of here, and then he opens the door, and there's a bunch of Sontarans ready to shoot him, which they don't get the chance to, thanks to a friendly dog, not so friendly dog.
Yeah, Carvanista shows up at that moment with the wonderful line, "I've still got a human in this fight."
Yeah.
Instead of "I've still got a dog I have a dog in this fight."
Yep.
And Carvanista bails Dan out and then reveals a plan for, here's how we're going to destroy the ships in the 21st century. We're going to pilot one of them to fly into the others. And Dan then says, hello, we're on the ship that you're flying. And he says, well, there's this escape tube or whatever, which turns out to be part of the plumbing system. And he throws Dan into the escape tube.
Yep.
And then he jumps in himself. And as we see them rushing towards the camera with the elements of the tube flying past them, Dan is screaming and Carvanista is howling.
Yeah.
which was really nice.
Yeah, there's some pretty good effects with Carvanista. Like they end up falling into the water, the Mersey River, and as they're coming out, they're soaked, and Carvanista shakes like a dog does, and
yes,
Dan gets
that
sprayed.
was great.
That was such a great effect. By the way, talked last episode about how much of Carvanista's effects are they practical? Are they actual cosmetics, or are they CGI? And there's a video on YouTube from the official Doctor Who site where you can see some of the behind the scenes where they another camera as they're filming scenes, and a lot of that is cosmetic. A lot of that is prosthetic. A lot of the fur effects. I mean, there are some of it that you can tell that they do a little CGI, like ears perking up and things like that. But as far as like his facial expressions, a lot of that is practical.
Yeah, and that's what I had assumed. It looks like practical makeup to me. One thing that I was glad to see clarified in a behind the scenes video that I watched is I had commented last time about how I didn't know whether it was in the script or not, but like when Carvanista realizes his Jedi mind trick device that he has on his wrist is not working, he sniffs it to see why is it not working. And I saw an interview or a clip with the actor where he was saying that was his idea, that he asked the producers, like, if I'm a dog, can I like sniff things, and can I tilt my head, cock my head to one side the way dogs do when they're thinking about something or listening to what a human is saying. And so he introduced those, and then this time we get the really nice shake after they come out of the river.
That was great. Yeah, you see the water, he's shaking, the water's coming off him, and then it turns to Dan, and he's just getting sprayed. Like, which, you know, if you've ever had a dog come out of the river, you know exactly what that's like. You know, they're pretty good about spraying you when they're wet. Now they kind of do, you know, a time hand wave over the fleet on Earth, because it does basically a temporal bang is how Carvanista puts it. You know, when the ships collide, they end up wiping out all the Sontarans on Earth because of time incursion, or however you want to put it. So I
don't know that I got that. I just got the idea that, okay, these are the ships they're about to launch into the past. The only one so far that's actually gone into the past is the set for the Crimean War. And so the Doctor has taken care of the ones in the Crimean War, and Carvanista and Dan then take care of the ones in the 21st century, so there will be no more invasions.
Well, and they had said that the Sontarans had conquered all of Earth.
Oh, yes. Okay, you're right.
And then when the Doctor's there, you got rid of all the Sontarans. You know, and so it was it was one of kind of those time hand wavy things of now all of a sudden they're all gone because temporal bang. And
yeah, and that's something they didn't really need to do. It's because we didn't even see anywhere other than Liverpool Concord. It could have been purely Liverpool as their foothold, and then, you know, you're just telling me about stuff off screen, and then now you're telling me that the stuff off screen has been taken care of. You could have just left the stuff off screen out altogether.
Right. Yeah, because when Dan met up with his parents, they said that they got the foothold in Liverpool, and then like within 6 hours had conquered the entire Earth, which is reasonable, I guess, depending on how many millions of Sontarans invade, but still. You know, by the way, they snuck in like at the last second before the Lupari shield took hold. So that, you know, they got millions of Sontarans through in like a blink of an eye, and nobody noticed until it was too late, apparently.
Yeah. They said something about a 3-minute eclipse occurring, and it wasn't entirely clear to me what they meant by that, because I think that the Lupari ships are still up there. At first I thought that it meant the 3-minute eclipse was like the Lupari were up there for 3 minutes and it blocked out the sun.
Right.
But I think the Lupari are still up there. That's why it's still dark.
Yeah. That's one thing. That's one thing Carvanista said, is that they're going to remain around the Earth protecting the planet, you know, so that they're still there. So at least, so that, again, that presumes that they're still there. This is kind of where I, you know, kind of have a little bit of grumble about the kind of little bit of the two endings of the Sontar fleets. You know, so you had of course, the general blows up the Sontar fleet, and the Doctor reads him the riot act about they were retreating and everything, which, by the way, the Sontarans didn't say they were retreating. They were doing a strategic withdrawal. Well, what do armies do when they do strategic withdrawals?
They regroup and come back.
Exactly. And he said, the Skak said, I'm coming back. And Doctor said, not while I'm here. It's like, well, you're not going to be there. You're going to want to get back and find your companions again. And sure enough, she did.
One thing in General Logan's favor is we've seen this situation before back in the Third Doctor's time. There were times where the Brigadier would destroy enemies over the Doctor's wishes, like the Silurians the first time they appeared.
Yep, exactly. So, but she's criticizing General Logan, but then she praises Dan and Carvanista for completely wiping, millions of Sontarans and their fleet from history. Just, they're gone. They don't exist anymore.
Yeah, the Doctor is very, very inconsistent about this whole death thing. At least, though, we didn't have for the vast majority of the episode, it just moved, and there was not a lot of moralizing.
Yeah.
And so, there's obviously a moral dimension to things that are going on, and you can tell that the Doctor doesn't approve of the general when he's planning battle actively with the Sontarans. She thinks that's really dumb, but at least we're not getting constant lectures about this stuff, which I thought was refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, this is one little niggle I have with this episode. This was my one little complaint with it, is this contrast between how she treated the general for blowing up the fleet that would come back, and for Dan for completely wiping out of history by blowing up the fleet. You know? So, I mean, again, that's pretty minor. Otherwise, this has been a good episode. So now with all this done, the two fleets are gone. The Doctor has gotten the TARDIS to modern day Liverpool, and Dan jumps in, and they get hijacked.
Yeah, and the TARDIS is really visibly worse this time.
Yep.
Than it was last time. It's like the interior console room is severely degraded, and they do get hijacked. And the Doctor also at one point says to the TARDIS, "What's going on with you?"
Yeah.
So clearly the Doctor does not know why the TARDIS is breaking down.
And so now this takes us to the third time area, the third thread that we haven't really talked about, and that's the Temple of Atropos on the planet Time.
Yeah, so if that name is familiar to anybody, Atropos is from Greek mythology, and so are the Moirai, as you would more properly pronounce it. The Moirai are the Greek goddesses of fate and destiny. So they're the fates. And Atropos is one of the three fates. Her sisters are Clotho and Lachesis. And Atropos's name means inflexible or unalterable. And her function among the fates is to render the decisions of her sister fates immutable and unchangeable. And so that's why she's called inflexible. So this is the Temple of Atropos, which apparently has something to do with enforcing time and the proper flow of time in the universe. It originally, and presumably the planet is called Time because of the role it has in time.
Yeah.
When the Doctor gets there, she says she's got a reading on the sonic that says the space-time coordinates are set to 0, which is impossible. And that could mean that the planet Time is in a pocket dimension or outside of our regular universe, or it could mean it's at the beginning of time. But apparently it's responsible for the proper flow of time, and the Moirai are, or Moirai as they say it in this episode, there's more than 3 of them. There's some, I didn't count exactly, but there's something like 7 to 9 of them.
Yeah, something like that.
And 2 of them have died for reasons unknown. And so they have these little upside down sort of flying diamond droids that are referred to in the credits as triangle priests.
Yep.
And so they're the priests of the temple. And when at first we see Vinder show up, and a triangle priest comes up to him and says, "Can you repair?" And it's obviously concerned about the 2 Moirai who have died. He wants the system to be repaired, but Vinder doesn't know what he's talking about. And then we see Yaz show up, and the first person she meets is Joseph Williamson, the guy from 19th century Liverpool, who is only in this episode briefly just to remind us that he's part of the story, so we won't freak out and go, "Who's that?" when he shows up again. But he's there just briefly, and then Yaz meets Vinder, having been brought again by a triangle priest who wants to know if she can repair. And one of the things we learn about Yaz is she's got a little thing that she's written on her hand, and apparently has it there all the time. She either doesn't wash her hands very often, or she rewrites this message a lot, but it's WWTDD. And for American Christians, that's going to be immediately transparent, at least for many of them, as her version of what would Jesus do, WWJD. And so for her, it's what would the Doctor do?
Exactly.
And that is, on the one hand, it's not a bad piece of advice to keep in mind, or it's not a bad question to ask yourself if you're a Doctor companion. On the other hand, it underscores the messianicness of the figure of the Doctor.
Yeah.
And I can see people having different feelings about that.
Yeah. And it's, let's be honest, sometimes the best thing to do might not be what the Doctor does, at least if you want to survive.
Well, true. Yeah.
Because sometimes the Doctor does things that might not always be the best. But so while Vinder and Yaz are trying to figure out what's going on with the Moirai, we have 3 new people show up. 2 we've met before. We have Azure, or Azure as they pronounce it, Swarm, and a new person, Passenger. that we've not met before yet.
Yeah, and Passenger looks more like Thanos in the comic books than he does Thanos in the movies, but he's kind of like Thanos. Except he's like got a completely, jet black head.
Yep. But we find out that Azure and Swarm had been there before, that they'd been to the temple, that the reason why you can't see the Mori until someone steps on the platform is they're quantum locked against Azure and Swarm, but then with Vinder and Yaz there, that it breaks that so that they can do whatever they're going to do.
Yeah, and at first the Triangle Priests don't recognize Azure and Swarm, and they're asking them if they can repair. And whereas we've seen Vinder and Yaz be asked that same question and not know what it means, as soon as Azure and Swarm get asked, can you repair? They both say, oh, yes.
Yep.
So they clearly have a lot of knowledge about what's going on here. And they've been here before. And eventually the Triangle Priests recognize who they are and say that this has been forbidden to them, that their person's forbidden here.
Yep.
And so they've apparently done something here before that was presumably bad. And I guess they're here to do something like it again.
Yeah.
But the doctor, when Swarm has brought her and Dan here, Swarm is talking to her and says that that because of the injury that's been done to the Morai here, which he doesn't seem to have done, at least that hasn't been revealed, time is starting to run wild. And so he's put in a temporary fix, and then he reveals that he's got Yaz and Vinder in the place of 2 of the Morai. And that is interesting because originally there were only 2 dead Morai. And the others were still alive. They were just standing there, but they were still alive. But then Swarm destroyed one of them, at least one of them.
Right.
So I don't know if the Morai are still down or if they have the number they need.
Yeah, I thought I was trying to figure out, because the ones that were dead, they were kind of like flickering in and out of existence. It was they were there and then they were dead, and I don't know if he destroyed one of the 2 that had. I missed to see for sure if he had destroyed the 2 that had died or
no. It was like a new one. It was a perfectly fine one that was just standing there, and he disintegrated her.
Yeah, that's I couldn't quite tell for sure. So yeah, that was kind of interesting that now they're down 4 instead of 2, and what's that doing with time? Of course, and is it Swarm's intention to destroy time? Is that's what he's trying to do? And that's let time run wild, because that's what they say the Mori do, is they control time, they keep time from running wild. It's evil, as the temple priest triangle thing says.
They also at one point in this sequence refer to who may have set up the temple and given it this authority, and the answer comes back, it's unknown.
Yep.
And so it's like, duh, it's Gallifrey, it's the Time Lords, or someone connected with them.
Well, and we've had hints so far in this season of the Timeless Child. So does this have something to do with that as well?
Yeah. Also, Vinder has referred to My Home Planet without naming it, and based on the way his costume looks, I'm thinking he's a Time Lord too.
He might be one of the Time Lord guards or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least he's Gallifreyan, if not a Time Lord.
Yeah.
One of the things that really I thought was very effective in the Planet of Time sequence is when Swarm and Passenger and Azure have shown up, and Swarm is threatening Yaz. Vinder pulls a gun, and so he's got a blaster, and he shoots at Swarm, who immediately teleports across the room. It's just instantaneous. The shot goes, and Swarm is somewhere else, and Swarm starts playing a game with him, where we have this shooty teleport game happening where he's daring him to shoot him, and every time he shoots, instantly Swarm is somewhere else. And then Azure wants to get in on it too, and she says like, "Ooh, do me," and Vendor shoots her, and of course instantly she's teleported away, and she jumps several times, and then finally she jumps right behind Yaz. And Vendor is swinging his arm and turning, to keep up with her and shooting as fast as he can. And when she teleports behind Yaz, he's got to stop himself instantly or he'll shoot Yaz. Yeah. And I thought that was very effectively played. And the timing in that was really great. Yeah, it was. And Swarm was a lot of fun because, at one point he's literally like leaning on the pedestal, got his arms crossed, just kind of leaning on a pedestal or on just kind of relaxed, but he just snaps right to that, and he's kind of mocking him as he's jumping too, Yeah. It was a kind of a interesting scene. Very, very well done. Now, what would be an interesting variant on that is you have a teleport game, a shooty teleport game like this being played, and at some point the person being shot at compares the shooter, who is actually a very good marksman, to a stormtrooper. Yeah, that would have been kind of an interesting catch. Yeah. So is there anything else, Jimmy, you want to mention about this episode? I just wanted to mention the very first thing we see in it, which isn't really connected to the plot, at least yet. When the Doctor wakes up, she is standing in black and white. So we have this black and white effect, which could mean a number of things. This could be a vision, it could be a memory, it could be both. But it was great to see the Doctor in black and white again. And she's standing in this forest, sort of forest, and in front of her is a crooked house. There was a crooked man who built a crooked house and so forth. And there's this crooked house in front of her. It is weird. It is like several different houses, wooden houses, stitched onto each other, old-fashioned wooden houses, stitched onto each other at crazy angles. And it's floating above the ground, and it looks partly smashed. And she starts to reach out to it, and that's when the memory or dream or vision ends, and she's on the ground in Crimea. Right. And so obviously this is not explored any further in this episode, exactly what this is. It's certain to come back and be explored in the next 4 episodes, because you don't spend money on a sequence like that without having a payoff for it. So it's clearly setting something up. I don't know what this house is. I think it's either something from her past. It may be something from her past, or it may be a visualization of the TARDIS in its broken state. That very well could be. Yeah, it was kind of an interesting scene. And the episode started out really interesting too, because it started out black with 3 chimes of the cloister bell before she has this vision. So it was very, kind of that. Yeah. So it does set up, is this a vision? Is this something she's remembering? It'll be interesting to see how they play that out. Well, but that's all I had. Well, very good. Well, I think then this would be a good time to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Maria N., Patricia R., Ron S., Ryan W., and Marian M. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows here at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. That's it from us. What did you think of War of the Sontarans? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send us an email at doctorwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next chapter, Once Upon a Time. I was going to say Once Upon a Time, but that's not it. It's Once Upon Time. Till then, Jimmy Akin, thanks for joining me in the Secrets of Doctor Who. Thanks, Father Cory. And once again, I'm Father Cory Sticha. Thank you to listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, it was pretty easy, really. I worked it out all by myself till Scooby-Doo here tried to take all the credit.
Right. This is going to be fun.